Now, if you follow knife content on social media, there's a very high probability you've been shown an advertisement for a rolling sharpener system. Now, it's probably not this one from Worksharp, but the sharpening system idea of having a rolling plate, it's an interesting one. And now that I've just sharpened a knife with this system, I have a better idea of why it's good or bad depending on what you're looking for. Let's just start with the good, the really good. This is the least stressful and potentially the fastest manual sharpening system you'll ever use. And I have the Pro PA from Worksharp, which is their top of the line angled sharpener. I think that for long blades like these chef's knives, this is actually faster and probably even more consistent, as long as you don't want a true polished edge, which you're going to need a strop and other things for. If you're just trying to get a good working edge on a tool, I think this is going to work better than a lot of the guided field sharpening systems. It just has fewer things to go wrong. That's the first thing to observe. The other thing is, if you have little experience with sharpening, this is going to be pretty straightforward and pretty easy. And the instructions, well, the instructions are pretty sparse here. You don't need all that much to explain it. Just 4 basic images here. It tells you which angle to select based on the different types of knives, right? And just, it's very simple. Roll it back and forth. Or at least that's what they're indicating. I have a couple of things I want to point out. And I'm going to actually switch out the to this ceramic cone here for just a second, which is very easy to do. Just slots in like that. And I was using a 17 degree edge. So this is a magnetic plate. It's got nice rubberized feet that will like keep it in place no matter what you're doing. But I tend to put my fingers right here. It keeps my hands away from the blade. And the same thing is true with the handle. My fingers are nowhere near the blade. Even if I were to slip, it would be very difficult to cut myself. So I really don't have to really give too much focus to it. But what I did learn, specifically with the Worksharp system, which has multiple rollers, is you don't want to focus on pushing into the blade. You do want to focus, however, on putting equal pressure on both sides of this grip. And what that's going to do is make it much easier to control the motion that you're doing with the roller. Now, I said it was faster, right? And here's why. Look at how quickly I can go through multiple passes without actually bringing my hands up or doing any different motion. Like, this is way faster than I would be able to do using any angle guided sharpening system, because I have to kind of like saw it along the edge, which won't be as consistent. I mean, this is a continuous motion. Now, I don't think it's going to be good for every knife. I have to try the smaller ones, and I think that will be a big determiner. But when it comes to large knives, I think I would rather use this system than use even a guided angled sharpener, weirdly enough. I don't know why, but it just feels so simple and so easy. And I'm not someone who enjoys sharpening. I don't like to sharpen knives. I want to be done with it. But this just feels really low stress and actually really almost fun. And what I'm thinking will happen is when this gets put in the hand of a novice, like my wife who has never sharpened a knife, it'll be very, very intuitive. And that, I think, is what they've captured here. A really simple, intuitive system. So where's the drawbacks? Is there a drawback to this? Yes, I think there is a drawback in the sense that if you have a smaller knife or that doesn't have a thick enough blade to span this distance, I think that it will be more difficult. You have to be more conscious about moving it up, for one thing. I also think that in some cases, this system might engage or miss out on some part of the blade because it hits a handle. That could happen as well. It doesn't really happen here because the blade extends past the handle. The same thing is kind of true here, but it might be the case. The other thing that's worth noting is if you had a very tall knife, let's say a machete. Now this will do very good at sharpening a machete because you can move along the entire length back and forth in very quick motions. But in order to get it to sit properly, you're probably going to want to put something underneath to elevate this to some extent. And I think that is very, very important. So that might become an issue. I don't know how much of an issue. It's hard to say. I'm going to have to try to find a large knife to see if we can make that happen. But you'll notice, at least on the 25 and 20 degree sides, they've elevated it a little bit to allow it to hold onto smaller blades. So that is something of note as well. Something I didn't see from any of the other rolling sharpener systems. Let's go ahead and let me just walk you through how to do it with this other knife. Now this is a really, really long blade. And if you were to do this on a guided field sharpener of some sort, you would, need to manipulate it to flip it over. It's so much easier. And the thing is this is such a compact system with these and just a couple of plates. This is going to be easier to take with, I think, in a lot of cases. And this might be a good, potentially even a field sharpener for people who use their longer knives more often, maybe machetes and so on. There's a good chance that this is an ideal system for that. So I'm going to run through this really quick. I'm going to speed through a lot of it to kind of show you how it is. And you'll notice it's just really straightforward and simple. We're going to use a 17 degree edge. And let's go ahead and get started. All right, so setup. First and foremost, we need to go to the 320 grit, and everything is marked on the actual plates themselves. That's our first mark. Now, I don't know what edge this is. I don't think it's been sharpened since we got it. It's very easy. Just stick it to the side. It lays flat on the table. And with a long blade like this, and I'm actually going to put it a little bit at an angle, this is where this system really shines. So if I started here, remember I'm pushing down equally on both sides. I can run the entire length of the blade in one stroke, and it's sharpening on the push and the pull. That's really cool because you're getting 2 passes every single time you go. It makes it so much faster, in fact, than a lot of the manual systems. I actually think there's a lot of really cool benefits to this. I'm going to run through it really quick, flip it over, and then after we do the first grit, then we'll talk about it. Okay. So you can see it's a little bit harder at the tip, especially when the blade is flexible, which makes it's kind of a bit of an advantage with this because you can kind of rotate the thing, not in a straight line, but kind of push into the blade as you're going. One of the nice things about having the dual feet set up, it does kind of turn a little bit, which is why you want to put equal pressure, otherwise it can potentially turn a little bit more on the flat areas. All right, yeah, that seems pretty good. We'll go ahead and switch off to the finer grit. So we'll go to 600 grit, and then we'll go to the hone, and then we'll be done. And like I said, this is a much, much faster system than many others. Oops, did the thing. Luckily the rubber caught it, so that's good. Yep. Okay, let's go ahead and wipe that off and see what we got here. Nice and consistent. The hardest part I find with this is getting the edge proper at the tip. That is the one thing I struggle with. Obviously the straight areas are pretty good, nice and sharp. The only problem I'm having is consistently doing it at the tip. What I've noticed really works is changing it so that the tip is coming in towards the side that you have the sharpener. It makes it a little bit easier to stay on it as you're going. So when it's in the opposite direction, you want the tip going that way, and so on. That's what seems to be better for me. You know, mileage may vary, but that seems to work. Oh, almost didn't put the right thing together. There you go. So we'll grab the honing rod, and we'll go from there. All right. All right, let's give it a shot, see how it goes. How is this going to cut? It's not toothy, I don't feel any resistance, so that's the good thing. Obviously, paper is in a very, very serious test, and what more interests me is how simple and easy that was, right? I actually think this is likely even faster than a V-edge, you know, where you pull sharpeners, you pull them through without actually damaging the edge, which those tend to do on a very regular basis. Like you can put just too much pressure and immediately cause more damage to the blade than being dull. This feels very hard to mess up. You notice the one time I was going too fast and I skipped over it. But what happens is there's like a softer metal area here and then a rubber. And what happened is the rubber caught the blade. And I noticed that it did not do any damage. But the big thing, the big takeaway is you tend, because it's so easy, you tend to like go faster and faster. Try to get that control. And don't worry so much about passes. What I would recommend, and I probably didn't do a really good job in this video, is to set a timer. To say 1 minute on each side, and you know, per grit, or 2 minutes each side per grit, or some combination, and set the timer, because you go through so many passes. Keeping track of that is probably a bit much for most people. I don't even think it might not even matter that much in reality. So set a timer, and in fact, if they were going to come out with an upgraded version, I would like them to install a small timer right here in the center. I think that would be really, really cool, and I think it would just really help with the overall usability of this thing. Not that it needs much more. I mean, it's a pretty complete system. I don't know how well it will sharpen the smaller knives, but when it comes to these chef's knives, fantastic. I mean, it really does a good job, and does so in sort of this really enjoyable manner. I've used, you know, powered sharpeners. Obviously, they could do it a little bit faster, but for manual, this is smooth. It's easy. Yeah, not much more to say. We'll do a follow-up video at some point with this, where we give this to a novice and see how they work out with the whole thing. But as far as I can tell, this is a really good system for someone who just wants to get it sharpened and do so quickly. As always, thank you guys so much for your time, and we'll talk again soon.